one and all, and welcome to another episode of Bag of Chat. It's been quite a while since we've done an episode, but of course we have returned. My name is Mitch Pattinson, and as always, we're joined by Ethan Daffy. And today we're doing a bit of a draft preview. So we're just going to go through and touch on a few things in the upcoming draft days on the 20th of November. But we're also going to touch on a few things from the trade period because it has been a while since we've done the episodes. But Daffy boy, first things first, mate. How are you?
I'm good, mate. It's always good to talk a little bit of Carlton in the off season. It's good to. I was talking about it the other day with a few of the boys. I'm like, it's just good to have the mind off footy actually for a bit, because the season, when the season's in full swing, probably hits about February, March when you start getting into the swing of things, and your mind's pretty much mostly on Carlton for that period of time. So. No, it's been good to focus on other sports and just other things in life, isn't it? I'm hanging out with mates and, our Saturday nights not being filled with stress and agony of watching Carlton.
It's a really good way to put it because most weeks it's either we're really excited and we've kind of missed the adrenaline rush, but also we've been sometimes not so excited. We've been, we're seeing it again from 2021 football stuff, mate. But we're going to get into the trade period. Now, there's been a lot of movement. There's been a few movements, of course, outside the club, but we've of course brought in two players. One, of course, from the trade period, and of course, one was straight after through the delisted free agency. But of course, we're going to touch on the players that we've brought out of the club, and of course, we're going to touch on Zach Fisher. So with that. I guess that deal, it was Zach Fisher, and we lost pick 17, but we also gained pick 21 and pick 25 in return. And also Paddy Dow. So his deal was Paddy Dow, of course, moving to St Kilda. And of course, we lose the future third and future fourth, but we gain a future third and second and two future fourth round picks. And of course, Zach Fisher, I didn't mention it, but he's, of course, off to North Melbourne. But Daffy boy, out of those two, deals, it was pretty substantial stuff. We kind of expected to happen. But Zach Fisher and Paddy Dow, them leaving the club, what were your thoughts on that? But also the deal itself, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you look at the Dow deal, that was just ridiculous. I think it was like a 4-team trade where it was Caulfield going to the Dogs as well, and that was just dragging on for, I don't know what was going on. Like, you look at it, you look at that first. I'll look at this one first, and you lose a future. What the hell is that deal? Well, it's a load of hassling for just little picks. But
yeah,
the good thing is we'll touch on later in terms of future picks for our father son priorities for next year. So that's probably what really got the deal done. And then obviously Zach Fisher, I think the deal was pretty good for us, to be honest. I think it's probably a win for us almost. I think Zach Fisher's probably good for them. He'll probably be a good, type of player that can play kind of all different roles for them. So it's probably what they need at that age. But yeah, we get pick 21 and 25, which we'll definitely use. We just turned into obviously 22 and 28 currently, which I'll take that. I will take that, to be honest with you. Considering, our squad right now is pretty much set. We've made a preliminary final, so it's a very different situation to be in, where we're not trying to focus on too many blokes higher end picks currently, which is weird. But Nick Austin's a fantastic list manager, so I think he can turn those picks into something come draft time.
Yeah, I reckon that's probably one of the picks out of the trade period that was actually kind of a win-win, almost in terms of because North Melbourne definitely needed Zach Fisher. They needed that sort of zippy midfielder. And from our end, of course, we would have loved to keep Fisher.
Yeah.
But realistically, we didn't really need him. He was out of position anyway, playing in the back line. He's not a defender. He played very well in the defense when we needed him, and he stepped up when we needed him to. But we didn't really need Zach Fisher. And that's what I'm saying, where we give up Zach Fisher and pick 17, and you kind of look at that and be like, oh, shit. But we get 21 and 25 in return. And as you touched on, when I was shaking my head, pick 22 and pick 28, it slid down to. But also to touch on Paddy Dow, it's always those deals. There's always that trade, that deal that happens, whether it's like 4 or 5 clubs. And of course, it has to happen with Paddy Dow. But I think from a Paddy Dow point of view, I'm just happy that he found an opportunity at another club, and you just know that he will be in that best 22 at St Kilda. But we'll now move on to the players that, of course, we brought in. Elijah Hollins, the brother of Ollie Hollins, is now a Carlton man. And alongside that, we lost pick 25, and right now it's pick 26 as it stands. But I think now it's even slid down to 28. So, and then also a future third round pick, but in exchange, we got pick 28, which is pretty handy. Future fourth, and of course, Elijah Hollins in the deal. But also, we brought in a former Bomber and a former Port Adelaide player, a guy that was kind of, I guess, found himself outside of the best 22 at Port Adelaide, and is definitely. He's had some pretty handy games in his career, and of course, it's Orazio Fantasia is now a Navy Blue. So those two players, after boy, I know that Elijah Hollins is a fantastic get because he is a pick 7 in 2021 or 2020. Quite unbelievable how he's kind of gone under the radar. I know that he's been through a lot of injuries at Gold Coast Suns, but when he's actually played, I can think back to 2020 when he dominated a few times through the COVID year. And I'm like, this guy's actually good. And even at that time, I'm like, yeah, he's got something about him. And when we were kind of interested in him and he was interested in maybe moving over to other Navy Blues, I think I was excited as soon as I heard it. But of course, Orazio Fantasia, make sure to touch on him as well.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty content with these pickups. Obviously, Elijah, his first year was impacted with an ACL, so he missed his whole first year. And then, I find a very odd situation with the Suns in their list. And obviously, with a new coach coming in, he probably thought, maybe it's an opportunity to get going. And it's a bit of a weird deal as well for him because he's actually taken a massive risk. He had another year left at the Suns, and we've actually only signed him to a 1-year deal. It's going to be a 3-year deal. And obviously he had some, off-field stuff, around the last few months. And, it's a mistake. They all make mistakes. I think it was just a one-off little mistake. Young guys do it. I don't think it's really going to affect him. I think him and his brother are true professionals, and I think he's going to be a great player for us. And he feels that need, doesn't he? He's just a classy. We just need to bring classy players in. I just think it's just all about ball use, and this, the way footy works these days. It's those best teams. They always have that class, that extra class. Every team has their classy players, whether it's through the midfield or half forward or half back, but. If you just continue adding that depth and those layers, I actually watched the VFL Grand Final, and he was probably, second best on the ground behind Werribee bloke who kicked 6 goals. So I think he had 30 and 10 clearances and 10 tackles or something like that. So he was far too good for that level. In a game where it's a grand final, it's not like he's playing VFL round 18 versus, some random team. So, it's eyes on him at Icon Park. So he'll be training there this year. And with Orazio, it was a very random kind of get, because I knew that he had a medical with the Giants, a month and a half ago, and I thought he was going to go there. There was obviously a few whispers through there, and I think they only offered him. I think the only thing that differed our offer from him, I think we offered him 2, and they offered him 1. So 1 and a rookie deal. So we've signed him on a proper deal. He's on our list. And personally, I think this is a ripper. I think it's an absolute ripper deal, because I think the only reason why is he hasn't been playing. He just hasn't been on the park. He's been injured. That's been his issue all year. The last 2 years at Port Adelaide, he's played when he's fit. He's played when he's fit. It's he hasn't played too many, but he's been, the injuries have been massive. But the Blues must think, we can get this guy fit. Me personally, if he gets going, he's in our best 22. He's kicked 40 goals, and he's kicked 40 goals a couple of times in years. And he's that type of guy that you add to a really good team and a good system. It could really, really work. And he's not going to be on that big of a pay packet. Let's be real. You'd be on 200, 300K or something like that. 2 years, why not? Why not, Patto? And even better when he plays against Essendon and kicks 10, it'll be even better.
Mate, Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really good pickup and a really out of the box type of pickup.
Yeah. And usually those picks actually turn into a bit of gold because you kind of like it kind of comes out of nowhere, and then you kind of, because as you just mentioned, he was kind of always, we thought that Fantasia was going to make his way to the Giants, and then out of nowhere we kind of chipped in, and then he was like, oh well, I think I'll probably want a little bit more security, and I think it would be great to play for a big Victorian club, and especially coming off a prelim, I think it was quite appealing to him to come to the Navy Blues. So I think it's a win-win, but also how I'm seeing it, and I don't think it will turn into this way. But think back to 2018, I think it was the period, Alex Fasolo from the Pies. And that, no, but when it came up, and I'm like, Alex Fasolo, okay, well, he's solid. He was injured. He started at the Pies. He was quite, I mean, of course, quite a solid player. Injuries, quite a lot of injuries. Moved to the Blues, wanted a new start. Looked somewhat promising round one against the Tigers. Then after that, we didn't see him again in the Navy Blues. So I don't think it's going to be like, I don't think it's going to go down that path just because Orazio, I think Carlton's kind of past that where it's like, we're not going to take the risk. It's not worth it. And I think we've kind of progressed as a club. And I think AFL players have progressed since then as well, where if he was performing like that, he would have been cut already. And no other club would have been looking into him. So Orazio obviously had something in him that Carlton saw, okay, well, we want to try and take it. It's not taking a risk. It's more just we need more small forwards. We need
put pressure on the others. Put pressure on them.
Because seriously, right now he could walk straight in. Of course, he's going to start.
For sure, he could. For sure.
But like I think he's going to start right at the bottom. But he could come in round one. He could take an OE spot. He can take a Motlop. He's definitely in front of probably like a Corey Durden. And right now, like since we lost like a Josh Honey, now Orazio is kind of replacing Honey, but he is a lot more established than Josh Honey. But yeah, so now we're going to move on to the draft side of things. And of course, it is the national draft, November 20th. Next Monday is, of course, day one of the draft. Now, Daffy Boy, I'm going to give you the reins, mate, just because I know that you've done a lot of research, and I know that there's been a lot of stuff that you want to try and touch on, and I just think it's a lot easier for the viewers' side of things as well, that you touch on your things. And if you think that you want me to touch on anything, of course I can, but I'll throw it over to you, mate. National draft.
Yeah, it's always an interesting time to draft. It's hard to sometimes have a gauge on what your club needs. I think, heading into this year, it's very tough. And, I was looking at a few different, needs. I'll look through a few different needs, and I'll also, touch base with you in terms of what we need and what you think we need, or, it's really tough with the draft. And I'll start off with the current picks we obviously hold and the current position they're in before they slide, obviously, with the academy and all those, bids and all those great stuff that'll slide out picks from 22 to 782. So the current picks we have, obviously, current picks is 22, 28, 70, 78, and 96. So for me, you're probably using the first two definitely, and maybe trying to get a third, or you might use that 70 for a late. For me, I think it should be used on maybe a mature player in the state leagues, whether it's key position, like a 25, 26-year-old. Doesn't have to be a superstar or anything, but in terms of depth, like with Sam Durden, he's depth. We brought him in mid-season. Now he's part of that depth in terms of key defense. Maybe we need a key forward that's just, going to ply his trade at the VFL unless an injury comes up. So for me, I don't mind our hand this year. What are your thoughts, Patto, in terms of, our picks? I don't think we are in need of high picks. Obviously, you'd love a high pick, but what are your ultimate thoughts on this draft hand?
Yeah, my opinion is, I think last year we needed that first round pick where we needed a star player, young guy coming through. But now that we got Ollie Hollands, I just don't think we really needed to go once again, because next year, of course, with the Twins, they
Yeah.
they are vital components for our future. And I just think that right now, like this year, you can kind of get players along the way, and pick 22 and pick 28 are still pretty solid picks. And of course, they are expected to slide to 28 and 32. But I just don't think it's a massive thing this year, just because we made a prelim. We didn't lose anyone other than Paddy Dow and Zach Fisher, and they weren't really in the best 22 anyway. We're adding Zach Williams back into the side. We've got Elijah Hollands playing. We've got Orazio Fantasia, who will be putting pressure on the small forwards. You got picks 22 and 28 right there. And as we just mentioned, I think they'll slide to 28 and 32. They're still pretty solid picks. And they're late second rounds, start of third rounds. And as you said, like, we can still use the 70 and the 78 and the 96. I think that would be a rookie draft, but we can still get a solid, mature age player there. So, yeah, I mean, I'm excited, but I just think that we're kind of more focusing on next year's draft than this year's one.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, well, I'll touch on the future picks now. Obviously, we've gained through, obviously our own ones. I think the first two are our ones. So obviously the first two, the round one, and the round two, and then the ones we gained through the trade period were the 3 round fours. So people sometimes don't get how, I think when deals get done and people go, oh, why did Gold Coast get rid of da-da-da? And they gained, because they had academy picks this year. They need to get their academy picks. And I think they've got a bunch of guns in the next few years. So that's how they've done it. Obviously, that's how we've done it this year. So I think it's just a great thing to do in terms of we've got a first rounder still. We've still got a first rounder and we'll bid for academy picks. So we're in a really good position right now. And like you said, we've picked up guys that are already filling out needs. And for me, with the upcoming needs that I'll touch on now, it's not particularly, oh my God, we need this guy to come in round one and needs to come in, da-da-da. This is guys that will be working under, a midfield group, a forward group, a defensive group. And in, 2-3 years, or when he's needed, he'll come in and be a gun. So first of all, I'll start off with needs. And I think it's a need of almost every team, I think, when it comes to a draft, and it's a midfield depth. And I think with Paddy Dow and Ed Curnow leaving the club, obviously in their two separate ways, obviously Ed retiring and Paddy Dow being traded away, I think we need a little bit more midfield depth. Obviously, we've got Hollands in. And we've got other guys like Carroll and stuff like that can step up. I still think we need that midfield depth, and there's plenty of players that, and I'll touch on one of them here, that I think we could really get, and it could be just a nice little bit of piece in 4 years' time. You go, oh, that was a good pick, and now he's coming up when Cripper retires. I hate to say it, but it's going to happen. What is he, 28, 29 next year? I don't know how long he's got, probably 4 or 5 years, maybe max. You've got to constantly improve your depth. And you see with teams like Geelong, they pull out midfields all the time. And, Collingwoods, they always have these young guys come in and they win flags. So I'll start off with the first one. It's George Stevens. He's from the Vic country. He's a midfielder, 189 centimetres. He's 100 kilos. So obviously he's a big boy. He's a contested beast. And he's ranked around 25 to 30 mark. It's obviously, once again, hard to gauge sometimes how it's all going to work, in terms of some teams might pick it, rate a guy at pick 20 because that's their needs. They either go, we need this guy, but then pretend Hawthorn go, we don't need this guy, we rate him at 40. So it's all about needs and wants. His strengths, obviously, consistency, his contested game, obviously he's a big guy. His strength and his tackling and his work rate. So for me, I think a perfect guy to work under is Patrick Cripps for this guy. You work under him, you get your midfield depth up. In 3 years' time, he can take the reins in terms of getting into that starting 22. What are your thoughts, Patto? Because I think, I watched a bit of his highlights. I'm like, this guy's he's a bit of obviously shorter than Cripper, but I think he's that kind of contested bull that you kind of, an Ed Curnow, in terms of he covers that a little bit, not in terms of he is Ed Curnow, but he's just that contested guy sometimes you need in your reserves and in case of an injury.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen highlights of him, and he reminds me of like a Luke Parker, and he plays a lot like a Patrick Cripps, and of course, he's smaller than Paddy Cripps, but weight-wise, for 18, 19, like, you're looking there, 2005, these guys were born. Doesn't that look feel old? Like, I'm 01, you're 02. These guys are 05. They go through and they're 05, and next year will be 06. Just unbelievable. But Looking at the weight as well, like 100 kg, and
Yeah.
he's 18, 19. So it's pretty insane to think about that these guys and the professionalism that's changed within these draftees
Oh,
in the past 5 years has been insane. And I reckon Sam Walsh is probably one of the first ones to really set that standard where you come in round one and you dominate. And and then even if this guy was to come in, like I think like a Stevens is probably a solid enough player where if you put him in for round one, I'd be happy for him to go. Like you kind of trust that. But I just think at the end of the day, you kind of always rely on development in the VFL, play a few years in play like 2 or 3 years in the VFL, and then under the guidance of Paddy Cripps and Sam Walsh and Adam Chera, George Hewitt, all these guys that have kind of progress sees these players. Because in the next few years, we're getting a few more midfielders as well that will pretty much be the future of the Carlton Football Club. These guys are going to be instrumental to this side. And you look there at the strengths like character, consistency, contested game, strength, tackling, work rate. That screams Patrick Cripps and George Hewitt. Let's be real.
Yeah.
It's just it's pretty I mean, I'm excited to just see new faces in the club. And George I think George Stevens is a great start.
Yeah, and I was looking at other midfielders around that mark, and he just kind of stood out to me in terms of I think we need that kind of contested midfielder coming up because we've got a lot of guys, Walsh and Chera who can kind of play inside and out. But I think sometimes you need that guy who does that, hard work in and under, and obviously Cripper does that, George Hewitt does that, like you said. So we'll move on to our next need, and I think for me it's a bit of key position, and I think when we have injuries to key positions, whether it's a forward or a defender, specifically a defender in the last few years, we've kind of panicked in terms of, oh no, who's coming in? Especially last year when we had 1,000 injuries to our key backs and we had, Wiedering come out and then Sam Durden came in for a game and he got injured. And then it was just like, it was all over the place at the time. And I think once again, it puts pressure on these guys like Lewis Young, who he's in a bit of limbo right now. He's in a bit of limbo in terms of his position in the team. And it's just another layer. It's just all about layers for me. And I think that's, the way I look at it. And the first guy we look at is he was actually in the longest kick competition. He won he was actually the young guy in the longest kick competition. And he won he got invited or something because he kicked this like 80-meter kick for Tassie, sorry. And his name's Ari Schoenmaker. So obviously he's rated around the 25 to 35 mark, key defender. And as said here, Ari Schoenmaker possesses a lethal left foot and is amongst the best playmaking defenders in this year's crop. And the way I look at it is the way our defenders play, they are playmakers. And I think this guy could fit that kind of style of play perfectly. His strengths, obviously, his ball use, his decision-making, obviously his kicking, like I said before, reading the play and rebounding. He's 194, so perfect kind of size for a key defender, can kind of play a little bit smaller. But how do you look at it, Patto? Because I think this guy, a lot of clubs will be looking at him. I don't think it will be a lock to get him, but for me, he kind of stands out.
Yeah, I think it's a great player to bring in, and you always need key position depth. And as you've mentioned, like last year we kind of needed that defender to stand up, and through that kind of hard times through probably round 8 to about round 14, like through those hard times, you needed that key defender to stand up because Lewis Young wasn't performing. Jacob Wieders was going off the radar a little bit. So, and I think we've kind of gone off the lockdown defender because I think how Carlton, how I see it is how they're performing is, and how their game plan is how they have that sole key defender, which is Jacob Wiedering. And then you have interceptors along the way, and you have a Marchie, you have a Brody Kemp, you have a Mitch McGovern down there. So Schoenmaker can kind of come in and, I guess, challenge these players, but also like you're in front of maybe like a Chin Cotter. Like Chin Cotter's probably that like the intercept defender, and those guys will be coming up against each other. Lewis Young, as you mentioned last year, we kind of saw this guy in the best 22, and we kind of shifted our game plan, and he's found his way outside of he's found his way out of the side, and now it's going to be pretty hard to get him back in. But to keep on Schoenmaker, I think it's great. And I always love left footers. And if
Yes.
you're lefty, like, I reckon if you're a left footer, you're more than welcome to join the Carlton Football Club. So, but ball use and I guess they're reading the play, kind of judging and anticipating what's coming forward. It's always a
Yeah.
great strength to have.
Yeah, and for the next kind of key position depth kind of player, it's probably more of a later side. So probably looking at our later picks, and it's Will Dawson that kind of caught my eye. Obviously, he's 200 centimeters, 200 centimeters, plays for the Gippsland Power. So and it plays both ends of the ground, and I feel like a guy like that is perfect in terms of, you can develop him as a defender or forward, whether depends what you need. And at 200 centimeters, you can almost bloody pinch it in the ruck. So his strengths, obviously, mobility at that height. Players nowadays have to be mobile. I think the old kind of tall players now are kind of being kind of pushed out in a sense. Not pushed out, but there's just less of them. There's just less of the stars being like that. His overhead marking, obviously, is good. Tackling, versatility. He's got a lot of upside, which is massive. I think it's more about how much better can this guy get. I think for me, just a little bit of a summary on that, Patto, because I think, I just looked at it as a late kind of pick. I'm not sure if he will be picked or rookied, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, he looks solid. I haven't seen a lot of him, but I just think these guys is where you kind of find those diamonds in the rough. And you always have these picks. And that's why I just think with the clubs that have these late round picks, you just need to make sure that you try and look into it. Because, of course, the front end talent at the start of the draft with maybe pick 1 to pick 30, of course, that's great. But you can also find some roughies in this later and maybe pick 65 to 90. Like these guys are Lockie Neal was a pick 67 or something. Like it's pretty insane how you can find diamonds in the rough. And now Lockie Neal is a 2-time Brownlow medalist. So guys like this is massive, and key position utility, it's detrimental to this side once again. And you can think of like a Harry Lemmy, like he was kind of transitioned into the defense last year in his draft year, but now he's playing as that sole key forward.
Yep.
Soon enough, maybe if Harry Mackay or Charlie Kerner goes down, he steps right in. So I don't think he'll play in the next few years. And I think Will Dawson's is the same thing. I think it's more of a development sort of play. But in a few years' time, if he was to come into the side and maybe replace a Wiedering down back or even a Harry Mackay down forward, I'll be more than happy for him to play.
Yep. So moving on from key position depth is others that caught our eye. So these guys are, they're not particularly our needs, or, they're just players that I think we could get, and I think it could make a massive impact in our side, whether it's straight away or in the future. So the first one is Ashton Moyer. And I think he's been talked about heaps. And obviously right here, he was once considered a pick 1 contender. He's actually a pick 1 contender last year. And he's a dual-footed forward. So left and right foot, he's probably the best in the draft, they reckon, in terms of both feet. He's rated in the 25 to 40 range. And the reason why is because he had such a good bottom age year last year for Glenelg, playing for South Australia as well as a bottom ager. He kicked 30 goals in the under-18s of the Sandful last year. Obviously broke through into the SA side and kicked 4 against Western Australia as a bottom ager. And those performances last year pegged him as a top pick. And obviously, people were comparing him to a kind of Isaac Heaney type forward and kind of play midfield. He's kind of that explosive type of forward. But since then, he has slid down just due to unlucky injuries this year. I think it's similar to a Harry Lemmy in terms of he was rated number pick 1 as well. I think he was rated a top 5 pick in his bottom age year because he was really good. And then when he was at top age, he kind of slid down a bit due to injuries, a little bit of form. But I think when these guys are so good at bottom age, I don't think you can't not look at them in terms of potential. And I think, Ashton Moyer is that type of guy, and he's that kind of half forward that kind of every team needs in terms of explosiveness, Patto.
You do see it a lot nowadays with really good kids in the year before in their bottom age and kind of having like some unfortunate injuries. But as soon as they get that opportunity in the AFL without any injuries, they perform. And Brody Kemp is probably one of the guys that come to my mind where he was really good in that year before when he was dominating, and he still went at pick 17 or something. I don't know exactly what he went for, but he had that ACL and he was like, we don't really know how this guy's going to go. But he was fantastic. And I think Moya is a type of guy that can really find his way if he just gets that opportunity. And once again, it's the diamond in the rough where you just try and take a risk, because I think he's worth it to take that risk. I think it's definitely worth it. But once again, a pretty good I guess option for a late round pick.
Yeah, and our final player we'll look at just briefly. I think our ruck stocks always need a little bit of adding to. And I think, we've got TDK and Pitto, obviously the key ruckman, and obviously O'Keefe as a third ruck, but he's very young as well, and he was taken kind of as a rookie listed player. Taylor Goad, he's rated 25 to 40, and he's highly rated. I was just reading before, a lot of teams are looking at him in terms of he's 206 centimeters. He's a former basketballer. He's played for South Australia. And I think with those types of dual athletes, they develop really well, and they know how to develop their game in terms of their professionalism, because they obviously play at high levels in both sports. And they say he's got terrific speed, and his rate of improvement is huge in the last couple of years. And his follow-up work's great. Obviously, that's what you need for a ruckman: mobility, and he's, like I said, rate of development. His size, speed, and obviously upside is huge. And what are your quick thoughts on that, Patto?
I think once again, it's worth a risk where I wouldn't mind another development ruckman for a few years' time, because right now we've got TDK and Pitto as the two sole ruckman that is going to play senior football. But in the next few years, you might see Alex Murkov if he gets his body right, and then of course some health issues as well. So hopefully he's still going well. But maybe you can see a Murkov, but also you might see a Hudson O'Keefe, who of course we drafted last year, and now maybe like a Goad might come into the team, and who knows, he might be a development ruckman. And at 206 centimeters, I think he looks quite like a lanky sort of type, but when he gets a little bit more weight to him and a little bit more muscles around the top of his body, I just think it's going to be great to see him play potentially some senior football. And that's why the preseason games is so important, because you can give these guys an opportunity to play against AFL players, because of course the AFL is fantastic for these guys to develop, but also the preseason games where you play against AFL teams and AFL players. You won't play against all AFL players, but you might come up against ruckman. I think I would like to see players like this kind of know what they're kind of coming up against, and know that they're going to be miles off, of course, but in a few years' time, under the guidance of the Matt Cruiser and of course TDK and Pitto at the front of their list, I think it's going to be great for a guy like this to kind of develop. And as you just mentioned, I think the strengths, like his mobility, is something that really, I guess, is quite appealing to me. But also size, speed, upside. I just think it's great to see a guy like this potentially coming into the side. And as you said, they're like 25 to 40 range around that pick. And usually there's not too many rucks that are solid enough to come into the side. And usually they are somewhat late in the piece because they're a ruckman. But you can also find a pretty solid ruckman later on in the piece. But yeah, mate, I'm quite excited to see all these players and who we decide to pick.
Yeah, no, it's good, and it's going to be interesting to see what we look at and who we pick. And you never really know in the draft. Sometimes it was a lock last year in terms of Hollands, but we didn't know we were to go for Lemmy. We didn't know where to go for other guys like that. So, with Goad, I think he's exciting. I think he's probably the first or second rated ruckman in the draft. So, I think at that range, you definitely take a look at that. But there's definitely other guys to look at. And in the comments below, make sure if you've got any guys that you think we should be picking, comment. Let us know, and we'll take a look at that.
Yep, completely spot on. But I mean, once again, I think last year was quite enjoyable trying to do this draft preview, because I think it's quite hard to always pick who these guys who's going to come into the side, whether the club kind of chooses this one player that was kind of out of nowhere, or these players kind of go before the expected pick. And who knows, I just think in the next week, there's going to be probably some more news coming out where some players might be interested. The club might be interested into some players. But I think overall, I think the players that you've chosen here, Daffy Boy, I think they're all quite different in their own sense as well. And I think if we can pick all these players, I think it's very unlikely we can pick all these players, but maybe if we could get a good, probably 3 or 4 players off this list, I think it's going to be a pretty exciting 2024. But yeah, mate, it's been a pleasure to be back on the episode. It's been probably a good, I don't even know how long it's been, probably like maybe 2 or 3 weeks. But yeah, mate, is there anything else you would like to touch on for the draft preview?
No, I'm just looking forward to the draft, and obviously we've got the Christmas break coming up, so everyone enjoy that. I know Patto's off to Auckland this week, so enjoy that, Patto. But yeah, to everyone, take the minds off, and I think training will probably start soonish as well. So we might head down to a couple of open trainings here and there to get ready for the 2024 Premiership.
Yeah, mate. Spot on. I reckon I might even write some notes down of how the players are training, because who knows, you might even see Mitch Pattinson in this list next year. Carlton Football Club, mate. But yeah, mate, been an absolute pleasure. But as we've mentioned a few times throughout the episode, make sure to try and give us as much support as possible. 2024, it's going to be a massive year for us at Baggers Chat. I know that hopefully it's going to most likely be, or hopefully it's going to be a great year for the Carlton side of things, but also for the podcast. It's a great way for us to come on and speak about it. And I somewhat have missed it just because I kind of miss speaking about Carlton. And I know that you don't have to worry about the stresses or anything about the upcoming games, but I also really enjoy this time of the year where it's like the draft previews. We can bring in some players in, but of course I think we'll try and touch on the players that we actually do pick. We'll try and do an episode of the players that we brought in. But yeah, mate, been an absolute pleasure being on the episode. But yeah, to all the viewers out there, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Make sure to leave us a review on Spotify and all the podcast platforms you see us on. But to you, Daffy boy, and to all the blue baggers out there, the baggers!
Come on.